Hello, everyone. It's Full Shock. So today I am going to do a kind of just talk through of one of the tech positions on Rosetta. So Rosetta is an incredibly complicated map. It's a very rich map, but we call it the speed metal of the rotation lobby because it's essentially like the richest map that you'll play on. In part because there's tons of mexes, and a bunch of these mexes are actually 3.0 mexes, and mid has the 10.0 mex. On top of that, each side gets a ton of geos, right? Crater player here gets a geo, my tech position gets a geo, air gets a geo, this tech position gets a geo, and then this other frontline position gets a geo. So it's incredibly resource rich. But wind is trash on it. You basically never want to make wind. It doesn't make any sense. It's a solar map. But in terms of how it's played, one of the most difficult parts of Rosetta is the strong side, weak side dynamic on the edges. So these are kind of like the two lanes that have this dynamic, and it's mirrored up top. And if we divide them in the middle, you'll see that this guy ends up with around 7 mexes. And this guy ends up with, well, it kind of depends on assignment. Generally speaking, he'll end up with somewhere between like 12 to 13, which if you just compare those two numbers, it's kind of brutal. So we call this position crater, or rather rudely, the speed bump spot, because quite frequently you're going to get rolled through it. However, because Rosetta is so rich, especially for tech positions, this is probably the single richest tech position on any map that's played outside of speed metal. The position that spawns here needs to be a little bit more defensive and is going to try to hold here and then impact bottom and sort of like save his speed bump spot. On the opposite side, the tech position up here is normally a little bit more aggressive. And so Bing, who's here, is traditionally a little bit more aggressive, and then I Will Conquer, who's here, is the other tech position, and they'll be a little bit more aggressive. Now, keep in mind that Rosetta is a 5-3, meaning 5 front, 3 back, right? And your air position pretty much always spawns here. Between the two techs, it's super variable for what you want to do. Well, you will normally see like this top side being a little bit more aggressive and this side being a little bit more scaly. It's completely fine, right? Both sides can be aggressive, both sides can scale. It really depends on who you're playing with and really the player themselves. For me, I'm going to choose back here because this again isn't a super high OS lobby, right? Like we have a min of 20, and some of these people also have a little bit higher uncertainty. So I want a backline on here because Rosetta is one of the few maps that you can actually carry from the backline on. And the reason for that is that because it's so rich, you can be out on the map at like 5 minutes. And traditionally on Rosetta, you don't actually detonate your commander because you're always so flush with metal. So my plan here by spawning here is essentially to try to scale and get to T2 as quickly as possible. And then depending on what I Will Conquer will do, I either need to give out T2 cons to the team, or I need to scale and then try to push bot or save bot. But this is kind of like more of a flex position than a tech position because you can sort of do anything from here and you really need to be responsive to the state of the game. Because it is a solar map, you'll see a ton of players going core, and just because core solar is a little bit better. So we'll have a standard solar opening, which is going to be triple mex into double solar, and then I'm going to go bot lab. Core bots are absolutely amazing, especially in a map with terrain. They're probably, I would argue, at least on a map like Rosetta, they're probably better than ARM vehicles. The reason why I want to go core bots is because it's cheaper, but Rosetta also has reclaim that can kind of be contested. So like there's reclaim here, there's reclaim on the side, and then there's the mid reclaim here. All in all, because you're so rich, the 4,000 metal isn't super valuable, but it still does help. And so it makes sense to at least either try to contest the metal or to pick it up yourself. And I want the bot scaling. The other reason why you kind of want to go bots in this situation is that you want to take Geo as soon as possible, because a T1 Geo, well, T1 or T2 Geo, they're both incredible energy sources, right? So the goal is, turn down the volume. So the goal is to take this relatively quickly. And if I have a vehicle, he needs to kind of do like a walk like that. And whereas bots can kind of do more of a walk like this, and it's generally a bit faster. And I want grunts, because if I open vehicle, grunts can really abuse walking past like that, where if I try to fight opposing grunts here, they can run over the hill, and then my vehicles have to like run all the way back to fight them, but then they can just run up this hill, and then I need to like reverse and go over. So generally speaking, you'll see a lot of bots on Rosetta, specifically because of the terrain. I'm going to do a super standard opening here, right? Where I drop the 2 solars, I queue my lab, and then I queue a solar after, and then I shift click back to my lab to boost it right away. The reason you have to do this is because if we watch our lab, it takes forever before it starts building a unit, right? I probably stopped this a little bit late, but you can probably build like 30% of a solar in the time it takes a core bot lab to spin up and actually start producing units. So what I'm going to do is alternate between the unit that costs energy and the solar that costs 0 energy with my commander. So I build the solar, I build the unit, I build the solar, I build the unit. And as soon as I start to run out of energy, then I can just start building another solar, because I want to utilize all of my commander's build power as much as possible. So my first Resbot is going to come out, and he's going to take the contested rocks first, and then he'll take all the other rocks that are around. And same thing applies. So this is specific to teching on Rosetta, because like I said, I want to take this Geo as soon as possible. It takes a long time for a T1 con to build a Geo. I need to boost it with my commander in a bit. And this guy actually opened air, which is lucky for me. A lot of air players on Rosetta actually open bot because that's a stronger opening. But I need the transport to fly my commander around and actually like take Geos and stuff. Regardless, I want to get this started as soon as possible, because on Rosetta, unlike the vast majority of maps, you're very rarely metal constrained, but you're almost always energy constrained in the early phases of the game. So just acknowledging that and kind of being aware of that in the map pool is why I'm going to make that decision. And same thing, like I said before, applies, right? When I don't have the energy to build units, I'm going to put my build power onto solars, and then I can have him boost my lab after. So for these, I'll take that first, and this guy is going to cap all of these mexes and then come back. This is like a minor nitpick. Rosetta has a bunch of really weird mex values, right? There's 1s, 2s, 3s, and 10s. So your starting mexes are all 3s, but a bunch of the other scattered mexes around will be like 1.0s. So when you cap it, you actually want to try to cap the 1.0s last, because they're the least valuable. And that's doubly true for tier 2, right? Because if you upgrade a mex, it goes from 100% extraction value to 400% extraction value, which means that it pays for itself much quicker. So when these metal extractors that are 3.0s get upgraded, they go from 3 to 12, but the 1.0s, they go from 3 to 12. The 1.0s just go from 1 to 4. It takes a very long time for a 4.0 mex to pay for itself for tier 2, because there's 620 metal. And so just be aware when you're upgrading them. That's why I make that choice to select that last. Okay, it is Rosetta, and my ally is in the speed bump spot. So I'm gonna make grunts, because a lot of times when you're on Rosetta, people will try to do a run by like this, right? Where they kind of flood up here or flood down there. It doesn't always happen that way, but one of the great things about teching on Rosetta is that you can actually make units and have them here and have your commander here. And I want to make units because I'm afraid that if he does get raided or if anything happens, I want to have at least a few grunts on the field so that I can attack and, you know, attack, defend, or just like have a presence out on the map. And it's a solar map and I am stalling on E, so I'm just gonna spam out basic solars with my commander. He's got the most BP and I have a ton of energy or metal production, right? And I'm still upgrading this geo, but I just want to keep upgrading all of my mechs, or all of my solars, and just pump them out until I have around 200 energy. If you have one constructor and your commander building the geo, you can generally get by with about 200 energy income, especially if you drop an e-storage before. And once you build your geo, you basically are completely set for all your tier 1 energy production, and you can just immediately go T2 or figure out what else you want to do. So I let my con finish building this. I let my commander finish building this constructor so that this con can come over and he can still put BP into the lab so I can make units. But then my commander needs to come over here and he needs to finish my geo. On Rosetta, this is actually probably a little bit late for a geo. You want it around 3 minutes traditionally. But that's just kind of, you know, how it goes. And I've got my grunts in the stopgap here, and if anything, I want to try to, you know, stop the raids, and I can also use them to, like, as a show of force, especially on radar. So I start e-stalling again while building this, and so I just turn and I start dropping basic solars, right? I have tons of metal, I need energy, and so I'm just going to keep dropping basic solars, and then once my energy recovers, then I can boost my lab. I honestly probably misplay a bit here in terms of macro micro. So what my commander should do is just be locked on here. And what I should have done is not built this turret and not built other constructors and just committed 100% of my energy production into finishing this geo because it's more important. But I stall a little bit here and I'm kind of running around and looking at other parts of the map. So because of that, I kind of, you know, like miss micro and there's just inefficiency there. I also should have taken these sooner, but I queue them up now. So geo is done and we are happy. We're going to pick up this con and fly him back, and we're going to immediately drop our tier 2. But when we look up here, we realize that top is kind of having a few issues. So just to help out wherever possible, I'm going to bring my grunts that were on bot and send them up top. And I do that in part because my player here seems like he's relatively competent. Like, he's got units out and he's expanding forward with his comm. And because this guy, the beauty, is pushing forward, I can see these units on radar moving up, which means that this lane shouldn't really be in too much danger right now, unless the dark red player decides to push. But he is probably doing what I'm doing, or what I Will Conquer is doing, which is getting to a quick T2 and then trying to have a timing push. So I can pull these up and then hopefully send them up soon. And I still have, this is my original res bot, right? He ate a bunch of the rocks and now he's running around and just rezzing other things. I actually, I set him to res all of this because I wasn't sure if he'd be able to get cons out in time to upgrade it all, but I can just res like the mechs, for example, and then give it to him just so that he's not too far behind. So on most maps, when you tech, you actually only tech off of 2 nanos. Rosetta is so rich that you can tech off of 3. But on most other maps, you wouldn't want to do that. I look, it's like 5 minutes. We don't have these mechs tapped. Normally, this guy would tap these mechs because he's already at a disadvantage. And the fact that he hasn't taken these mechs, right, is a little brutal. I don't know why he didn't decide to take him, but because he didn't, I'm going to fly over and take him for myself. But like Bing, when here, who is this? Talkthrough, when he takes all of these, he's going to have he's going to have 13 mexes with all of that, and this guy's going to have 5. So if Kaldra decides to just fully commit to units and push, it's brutal. So regardless, I don't want to leave any wasted resources on the table. So instead, I'm gonna have my comm come here and build that, and then I'll just have a long queue, right? Like, okay. I mess this up sometimes when I do this, and it's something that you want to just kind of keep. If you're holding shift, sometimes you'll multi-drag them. But I say like, all right, build both the mexes, build a radar, and then drop a bunch of LLTs. And I want LLTs here in case there are raids that come like this, but I don't need this many LLTs. I'm just kind of like click dragging really quickly. And sometimes that'll get you into trouble, because even if you wanted this many LLTs, which you don't, you wouldn't want them all in a line where like one rocket bot can hit 4 LLTs at once. So that's a little bit of a miss micro for me. And then I'm going to start doing my lab. I APM stall a bit here, I think, because I'm kind of like flexing up north, but I needed to eat this lab a little bit sooner, right? You never need to keep old labs around if you aren't using them. You want to make sure that, now I'm going to eat it now, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting rid of metal that isn't useful at the moment. And I still have my grunts. This is something that you can do, which it's sort of like when you're playing against players, it might not work with like lower OS players, but it'll work with higher OS players a lot of times. Is the higher OS players will have radar, right? And when they're looking at the radar, right, they'll see here and they'll go, okay, there's only one color and there's quite a few radar dots, right? And, you know, if you look here, you're like, okay, there's 2 colors, right? And so naturally, whenever someone's looking at radar, they get a little concerned if there's more than one color. What I do with a lot of these grunts is I don't even engage with them, but I can put them sort of towards the front. And especially if I move them around, it looks to the other team like I'm here to support, right? When he looks here, he's like, whoa, like, why is Volshock here and dark green and light green? And so these grunts aren't even going to attack in mid, I don't think, but I have them there just as like a show of force, because these players are obviously going to have radar down. And on that radar, I actually want to visibly show my color, which kind of doesn't make sense sometimes, but in this context, it does, just so that they feel like, oh, maybe they don't want to attack here. And we've got this queued up. And I have a ton of excess energy, but I don't have excess metal. So I just want to drop converter so that I can convert all of that. When we look at the map, right? Let's pause it at 6 minutes. When we look at the map, well, as a techer, you always want to be looking at the map because you want to respond wherever possible. Even if it's little things just like moving my grunts up in case, you know, some units slip through, and then my grunts can, you know, help fight whatever goes through there. But I also need to be aware of how lanes are doing, because when you tech well, one of the core tenets of teching is knowing like when you can greed and make production and when you need to respond to a lane. And more importantly, when you're looking at these lanes, ideally you want to be able to look and kind of diagnose what a lane needs, right? So you can look and go, okay, you know, like it needs more units, or, oh, there's a commander, like you should have Janus or something. But it's a skill you want to practice. And that's why a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, it's why we always recommend for new players, instead of going backline, to play frontline, because good backline play is dictated by your ability to read the frontline, and you can't read the frontline if you haven't played the frontline. So when I look at this, I'm not super concerned about any of these per se. Mid is a little concerning just because JT's a really strong player and he's got these mexes here. This is kind of concerning, but overall, I think we're doing well. The big thing is that I need to look at my opposite kind of flex techer, and I need to see what he's doing. So in this game, I actually don't need to see what he's doing because it's I will conquer, and he's going to Czar rush every single game that he can. But in the majority of games, you need to look and you need to go, okay, is the other techer making units, or is the other techer handing out T2, or is the other techer just greed scaling? Right? So I will conquer here. He's going to make a Czar and he's going to push, but he could just as easily go here and then start handing out T2 cons to everyone. Or he could make his T2 lab, drop a metal storage, immediately eat it, and then drop an Aphis. But the point is that when you're playing backline, you need to be the most reactive player to the map. Well, aside probably from air, but you need to really react to the map. So I need to go, okay, if he's making units, the other players on my team aren't going to have T2. So I need to just start queuing up T2 and handing out T2, regardless if they pay me or not, because otherwise my team won't be able to scale. The downside to that means that I won't have T2 in the bottom lane for a long time. So I need to try to make sure that my commander stays near here so that if tier 2 units come or if something else comes, we have 2 commanders. And that's also one of the reasons why it's one of the reasons why you don't ever in a perfect world want to detonate your comm for metal on Rosetta. Because while it will boost your timing a little bit, generally speaking, because it's such a rich map, you see a lot of early T3 and you need D-guns for it. If you blow your commander and just have a slightly faster timing, a lot of times you end up throwing because there's going to be razors or there's going to be demons or there's going to be something else. And all you need is that one commander to run up, D-gun 2 of them and die to stop the push. But if you throw away your commander early, you can't. So being aware of that, I'm going to try to keep my commander on bottom, and then we can't really be aggressive, but I really need to monitor this because if he gets pushed, it's a problem. Luckily, my boy No Air actually did a decent run by, and so he's going to do a bit of damage to Bing's economy and snipe some of these mexes, or not Bing, sorry, Caldra's economy, and sort of slow him down a bit. But the main point of this is Conquer's making units, so I want to try to actually hook my team up. Another thing, this is actually the air player Geo, but he didn't take it. So what I'm going to do for now is take it and use it to help fund my tier 2 Geo, and then I can give this back to him later, right? I don't want to hold on to this forever because by holding on to it forever, he won't have the resources to fight against the top player in the game, Neza, who's the opposing heir. So I want to actually ensure and kind of set him up for success. So even if he didn't take his Geo, I want to take it and give it to him so he has the energy production to actually contest Neza in air. So here, these guys are just kind of moving around, and Arc gets a great raid in here. So like I said before, I kind of want to flex down and just be aware here. The whole Contra situation is a little concerning, but we're going to start dropping out all of our T2 and doing everything else. So my first con is going to come out and it's going to up all of these mexes. This is actually a little bit of a misplay from me because somewhere in here I queue the 1.0 mex, I think. Oh wait, no, there is one here. All right, so never mind. This is actually fine. We're good. So people start paying me as I up these mexes and just standard teching stuff, right? I'm just gonna, they pay and I'm gonna hand them out. And then I want to queue up more cons and start handing them out as best as possible. So ideally we won't have a lot of pressure here because Conquer early Zard and he's against the blue player, which means that he should be able to push him back quite a bit. Early Zard is really, really strong into T1. So what'll probably happen is a lot of these lanes are going to need to flex up one lane. And so my lane should be safe. So I'm going to feel relatively safe, still just pumping out units to get my team scaling, or just scaling myself by, you know, dropping AGOs and everything else. So just standard tech, right? I start handing it out. And Nez does some bombers, but our air player is able to shut it down, even though he's dropped Banshees. And my commander is just kind of in a holding pattern here. He's not really doing anything. I could maybe try to use him for BP, but I don't want him to go that far away from the front because he's holding this area in case anything happens. And I noticed that I had the massive queue, so I canceled it, but I actually should have dropped more, you know, I don't know, like 4 or 5 LLTs somewhere in here, just so that if there are raids or anything else, then we shut it down. Because how it is right now, like a group of 20 ticks can just roll in here and they can do a ton of damage. My commander won't be able to stop them. If you have even just a few LLTs to hold versus T1 leaks, you're just overall much, much safer. And I saw air coming in, and so I built an eradicator just to be safe. I didn't end up needing it, but that's just a reaction to the map of, oh, I'm not sure if my air player can stop this. Let me just preemptively drop AA in case. So one of the reasons why you want to transport is so that you can fly and drop T2 off to all of your allies. Another thing that I like, my first T2 that I didn't mention that's really specific to Rosetta is your first T2 should always go, you should always fly it to mid, and you should always tap this Mex. It's the single most important thing you can do as a techer. His Mex just got bombed, but I helped build it a little bit earlier. And the reason why is this is a 10.0 Mex. So when it's upgraded, it's, oh, this isn't upgraded. When it's upgraded, it's 40 metal a second, which is just like insane if you think about it. It's probably the single best mechs you can upgrade on any normal map because it's just so valuable. So you always want to try to get a T2 con there and tap it as soon as possible. Another thing here is these are my like original grunts, and I'm literally just running them up and down the map. One, to show like where they are in radar, but then two, for situations like this where if these grunts get in, it's an issue. But even me just helping with a few additional grunts to stop the raids coming in will help save the lane, right? It'll help stabilize the lane. And I have a res bot behind, either resing or eating all the metal just to help out. So still making T2s. I Will Conquer has a decent push up here. I don't actually remember what happens up here, but I still want to be aware of my lane. So now I need to get, I'm a little bit concerned, right? Cauldra has decided to push, and he's going to have way more resources than no air is. So I immediately start dropping LLTs, but then I need to get ready to run my commander down just in case. I also queue my AGO. This is probably a little late on Rosetta. Honestly, if you don't have to hand out T2 cons, the first thing you should queue is your AGO because energy production is so important on this map. And unfortunately, Conquer loses his Czar, but that's how it goes. And I'll drop those. So I've given out T2 to more or less everyone on my side of the map who needs it. Conquer can give T2 to, you know, the people here, but I've given T2 to everyone else. So now it's time for me, especially because I see him pushing, it's time for me to make units. And I'm core bots, right? So I'm just going to open Jammer, Radar, Sheldons, and then a couple Arbiters. Sheldons are great early because you can use them behind existing units, or you can just kind of use them with your LLT wall and your commander, and it's hard to push into. And they can chip away at all the stuff here, right? If they're fighting into, you know, something else that might be an issue, but early on they have awesome range, especially after the Mauser nerf, so it makes sense to just open with them. I'm also going to put in a few Arbiters, and you don't need that many, but Arbiters are your siege units. Sheldons don't have great bursts. They sort of just slowly eat away at units, and they don't have great range, right? They're only 850 range. Arbiters are incredible because they have 800 burst damage, so when they hit hard. It's AoE, and they have 1210 range. One of the hardest, or like not hardest, but one of the simplest counters to Sheldons is when my Sheldons start going this way, he can just build a rattlesnake like right there. And as I push, the rattlesnake will have the range to just kill the Sheldons when they're trying to come up. Because the Sheldons will need to walk like up to here to shoot. But Arbiters can fire from like just inside their range. And so if they're jammed, the rattle won't be able to fire. And my Arbiters, even if there's only 3 of them, they can just shoot a couple volleys and kill the rattlesnake. So think of Arbiters as they're preemptively countering the counters to Sheldons, right? Another common counter to Sheldons in terms of range are like snipers if the person has energy production, because they outrange Sheldons. But arbiters outrange snipers. So if you know snipers are like in the lane and they're somewhere here, right? You can just grab, you can just grab them and you can do an attack like line drag, but it'd be there with your arbiters, and you can just start chipping away and countering like the snipers or whatever else you'd be fighting for. It's just nice to have additional range for them while we up the geo. And I still have my grunts, they're chilling, but I'm gonna flex down to sort of help out there. And I need to eat these, but I'm M-stalling. So once energy is no longer a concern, I can eat all these basic solars. I probably could have balanced this a little bit better. I'm going to start eating them now, but I need this metal in units, and more importantly, I need this metal in the A solar, because once it's up, I'll be in a much stronger position. So this is why you keep your commander here, right? If there's a massive tank ball or if anything else is happening, I'm able to just come up and degun, and even if I only kill 1 or 2 units, he can't push here, right? He knows that, so his tanks need to back off, and I'm just buying time for my tier 2 to kick in and actually come. So we're just building these and we're still scaling. So once I have the jammer and the Sheldons, it's time to slowly push forward, chipping away at all the units that I can. I want my commander in the front because Sheldons are horrible frontline units. They're fragile, they're not incredibly fast, and I want the ability to degun like medium stouts or fiends or something else that comes running into them. The other reason why you want your commander on the front is because if you get shuried, your commander can drop nettles and shoot shuries, and you can repair anything that's damaged. So my goal now is to just slowly push across this lane with Sheldons, but I need to be careful. So at this point, right, like all the lanes are relatively equal. The problem is I've seen, we've seen this color, like the dark, like I am inevitable, that color. He's made units and he lost his comm here. I know he's active, right? And I've seen all the other players on the map. The one person that I haven't seen is dark red. And it's even more concerning because he blew his comm to try to maximize his eco. So, like you see the comm explosion and you can see like the comm wreck, even if you don't have vision for it. So when I see that, it gets really concerning because I'm like, okay, I'm making tier 2 units and I haven't seen him make anything. So he could be scaling really hard. And it's Rosetta, right? You can have like an 11-minute Aphis with an AGO on Rosetta if you just full eco it. So why that's concerning is that I'm making tier 2 units, and while spy bots will let me fight into early T3, it's very, very difficult once there's like a Vanguard or a couple Razors or anything else out, right? I'm really reliant on cloaked D-guns to shut those down. So that means that I need to try to be as active as possible now and do the damage with the T2 I'm making. It also means that I probably don't want to commit to more T2 than I have here. I want to also scale. I just want to drop this round of units, micro them, and then try to scale on the back end of it. And we want to keep our Sheldon safe. We don't need to like take any crazy risks with them. They're just going to come up. We can fight move them, or you can you can just hit F and go like that, or you can even just kind of click and go. Set target micro is probably better here, especially for certain things like if there's Dragon's Maws. But for now, we're just going to slowly chip away. The other thing that I can do is I can drop and I'm going to get spy bots preemptively for vision and in case I do need to emp something. And then my commander is AA, but I'm going to need other things with this push, right? So even though I don't want to make a ton of other stuff, I'll make some sumos as well. I'm going to need spam for vision and to take shots and to just kind of help with other things. I need res bots and I need anti-air. So I can just queue all this up on repeat, right? On like a 5-1-1 and I can just eternally send it here. And all of these are auto grouped. So all my grunts are going to be on a hotkey immediately, right? All of my anti-air is going to be on a hotkey, and all of my resbots are going to be on a hotkey, and I'll be using those hotkeys as I'm attacking here. And so all my new units just immediately join my army, and I don't need to worry about anything else. Some small notes for economy here, right? I might want more cons in this, but I have T1 cons boosting my tier 2 bot to up all of my mexes, right? Because I want to get AMXs up as soon as possible. That's really, really important. And there are a lot of maps where you can go, or you want to go fusion before advanced fusion. I don't want to do it on Rosetta. One, because I have a massive metal supply, and two, because I already have an AGO. So I don't need the scaling that a fusion would provide, because the units that I want to make that are T2, I can fund them off of just the AGO. And so instead, I'm just going to drop an APHIS right away so that I'll be able to spam more units and just be a little bit more prepared. And I'm just flying out stuff that I can. And you can see the Arbiter's range, right? Like the Sheldons are doing a bit of damage here, but the Arbiters are nice because they have that long range chip. And my comms on the front, I'm going to drop a few LLTs, which I probably didn't need to do, but my commander and my resbots, they're just eating everything behind me. This is one of the reasons why you always want resbots, not just for like resing stuff, but you always want to try to eat all the wrecks. A huge part of good frontline play, or just good play in bar, is wreck management, right? You want to take fights where you know you can secure the wrecks, and you want to eat the wrecks or res the wrecks as soon as possible. By grabbing them, it means that you can do things like take all the metal and you can just put it into an APHIS. Miss Micro here, I should have eaten these. Also, this is a little greedy from me. It's like 12 minutes before upping these and before building that APHIS. I honestly should have dropped anti-stealth and anti-nuke. I kind of get away from it from this one because I know that Neza bombed, but like I haven't seen units from Bing yet. So Bing could have theoretically just nuke rushed and erased me at like 11 minutes. So I'm playing a little bit loose with my anti-nuke timing here. Traditionally, like once you get AGO, you can just drop anti-nuke, drop anti-stealth, and you're kind of like a little bit more prepared. I'm upping these mexes first and building that because I want to try to pressure this lane. One good thing is that if you pressure like this, you're going to force the backliner to actually make units. And so even though I've only dropped, I dropped 5.5k metal in here and I don't even really need to make more units than this, I'm just going to utilize these to deal as much damage as possible early, and I can force the dark red player Bing to make units. I'm not really scared with this fight at all. When I'm fighting here, I want to stay at range, but Sheldons and Arbiters outrange Hounds. So when I'm taking the fights like this, I just need to stay at range. And there's certain things like you want to, set target where you can, but there isn't a lot of micro that you need to do here. You just want to try to kite as best as possible. You don't just want to just like straight move them in. And you want to just chip away while you're pushing forward. It's free real estate. We're going to upgrade it, right? We just want to take all of these. We might as well while we're here. So Neza's a really good air player, which means that for the entirety of the game, he's going to be abusing Shuris because they're probably the single best unit in bar. So that's one of the reasons why I preemptively queued up anti-air. However, Trashers are really, really slow. So it's going to take a bit for them to get there. But my commander's here, so he'll help with a little bit of the anti-air here. But unfortunately, Nowhere is going to lose a lot of his army because we didn't have anti-air in time. And so these Shuris can lock down basically all of this, and then they can clean it up. So even though I knew that I needed anti-air, I'm just a little late. And so he's going to lose a massive portion of his army, and we're going to get pushed back a bit. The upside is that Bing is making units, and that means that he's not scaling. So it sounds funny, but we're actually happy to see that, because if he's making hounds, I know that he's armed bots, and I can start thinking about counters, right? Like if snipers come in, I can already have spy bots ready to run up an emp, and I can have arbiters, I can just have all these things prepared so I know what he's there. But more importantly, if he's making hounds, he's not making razorbacks or something else. So my first Aphis is almost done, and then I can drop some converters and just get ready. And honestly, this isn't great macro for me. I'm a little bit too focused on the front. Ideally, I think I probably would have emptied out this lab, finished the Aphis, and then started building other units. But I just kind of queued everything up so that I could focus on microing the front. In a perfect world, I wouldn't have done that, but that's just kind of what happens. And if it happens to you, don't feel bad. So I recognize that I do need both of these. And even though it's really late, I still need to build them just to be safe. The other thing is that I'm not going to build them now, but normally, especially in the backline position like this, you always just want to drop a ton of flak. The reason why I don't in this specific instance is that I've seen Neza make a ton of bombers, and I've seen Neza make a ton of Shuris. And so I feel like we have air superiority, at least right now, right? Neza, from what I've seen, shouldn't have enough fighters to overwhelm my air player and be able to successfully bomb. With that said, I still probably should drop a flak here just in case. So we are going to continue pushing. And there's nothing really special here, right? Like I said before, I'm just staying at range, trying to use grave robbers whenever I can. And I've got all the units coming in. So first Aphis is done. I'm going to need converters for it. And then we just want to keep pushing. One really important thing that you want to try to do is you want your commander near the front and on the front, but you almost never want him, especially in T2, in the middle of your army. Because what'll often happen is when you look away for 1 second, they'll see him and they can just snipe him or rush him. And if your commander's in the middle of your army, they'll pop him and you just lose everything in one fell swoop. I've done that multiple times, and that's one of the reasons why my commander is over here. So generally speaking, he should probably be kind of still on the front, but a little bit below it so that my units can flex back. But it is what it is. And here I'm mismicroing a little bit. I probably should have stayed at range and not taken really any shots from them, but that's how it goes. So he's gonna spam ticks. I still have grunt spam, and I just want to focus on wreck control. I don't need to try to hard commit into his base. That's not what these units are for. These units are there to siege and chip. And while they're doing that, I'm gonna run behind and I'm gonna eat all the wrecks. And you can see I've queued up mexes because it's free real estate, so why not? In terms of units, I'm still seeing hounds. What I should be concerned about are spy bots, because spybot hound is actually relatively strong, and if he lands some good emps, we could get punished, but I'm not as worried because there are ticks and other things here, so that's good. And then to pair with my ranged units that have been run at a few times, I'm going to drop sumos. Sumos are god tier frontline units, right? They don't have very much range. If you look at them, right, they've got very little range. They require a ton of energy to shoot, but they're giga tanky and they're great at dealing with spam, and they're great at just getting shot in the face when something tries to run your ranged units. So I don't actually need that many. I think I queue 3 here, but you just want some of them as a frontline if you aren't going to be spamming fiends or anything else. I don't want to spam fiends into hounds, because hounds, especially if they swap to Goss, once there's large enough numbers of them, they can just kite fiends forever. So until front falls and I want to spill over with more fiends, I just want to keep scaling, doing everything else, and I want to try to lean on my Sheldons and my Arbiters to deal damage. Here, I'm going to just flex over. Instead of fighting his army, I want to try to come over here and just start damaging his economy. There's a weird sort of thing that happens with Sheldons though. They really suck at shooting at low ground, because if you look, if you look at their, apparently I can't look at their thing. If you look at their gun, see how it's like raised? It doesn't drop down. So if they're trying to shoot at something directly below, a lot of times they can't. So I sort of miss micro this, because my Arbiters can stay here and I can literally just do like an area attack like that, like a set target like that, and they'll kill everything. My Sheldons are going to struggle to shoot here, but the hounds can shoot back at them. So I can leave my Arbiters here and ungroup them, and then I can bring my Sheldons over here to keep fighting, and that's a better way to kind of deal with the situation that I don't do in the heat of the moment. I'm going to drop fiends. I'm going to swap to fiends because I still want to scale a bit, but I want the ability to kind of push in here and to raid. So again, Neza's going to come with Shuris. My Trashers are en route, but not quite here yet. And unfortunately, that's going to throw away a bunch of my army. If my commander was forward a little bit more, it wouldn't have been as big of an issue, but unfortunately he wasn't. I APM stall and I lose a ton of my army. I also had these grouped too much. If they were spread more, it would have been much, much better. Regardless, they're making units and we're fighting units and we're dealing quite a bit of damage. I want to try to maximize these ranged units and apply pressure with them without having to build a ton more of them, right? Because by not having to build more expensive Sheldons, I can build Aphis. And the dream is for me to get a few Aphis and then transition to something that will fully kill bot. The other problem is that as we're playing, I'm starting to feel like we're stalling out a bit. Right? Like we've been here for a bit and we're pushing, and I can keep spamming fiends, but I need to make sure that I am not losing. The really concerning part here is that there's a big wreck field and we don't have control of it. So while I can still chip away here, if I can't push up and actually take it, I don't want to fight here because he's going to get all of this. And if I'm losing units here, he can just push through. So I don't want to donate any more wrecks to it. The other concerning thing is that Brown is here. And if we keep pushing forward right now and actually break through, Brown can probably flex. So that isn't the end of the world if he does flex, but I just need to be aware of it in my decision making. And like always, we've got grave robbers in back, either repairing or eating. So I'm going to keep dropping Aphis, and then I'm going to drop a few more labs for spam. My air player has Banshees. That's just how it goes sometimes. But we want to keep pushing in and doing everything that we can. The rest of the map is still kind of stable, right? Like if we're looking at front lines, the front is kind of like this. So like I said before, I need to be cautious of Brown, but I need to be aware of other players, because if other lanes aren't pressuring, it means that I'm going to have to fight more and more players, right? I can end up getting Rainbow Warriored, and that is not enjoyable because a lot of times you just end up as a huge feed. So I pop his calm, we lose a lot there, and then I'm going to throw all of my fiends in and try to attack. And I'm going to APM stall and just feed like 1,000 metal. Don't do this. This is bad. When you raid like this, you kind of want, there are specific things you want to kill. And the things you want to kill are the things that are fragile, chain, or explode. So one of the best things you can kill are nanos, because nanos will chain. And so like if there's like a 3x3 grid here and you kill one or you kill two, they'll all chain and everything dies. The other thing that's great to kill are converters or geos, but those should be kind of like the first things that you target: nanos, converters, and geos. And here my AA has finally arrived, and so I'm able to actually push back the massive Shuri bolts. With that said, they're still locking down tons of units just because Shuris are an incredibly balanced and fair unit. So we have a little bit more wreck control here, and I'm still trying to push in. But Bing is spamming hounds, and I'm still struggling a bit here. So I need to make a decision. I'm still on T2 and I'm about to have my second APHIS, which means I will have the income to make T3 or to stay on heavy T2. If I stay on heavy T2, I'm going to swap to mammoths, but the caveat with mammoths is that they're giga slow. So I'm going to need to either buy or build a T2 air lab to get T2 transports so that I can fly them to the front. My air player is on T1 air, so I can't do that. I would need to build my own. And I don't remember when this happened, but at some point I upgraded this to, well, I gave it to him and I upgraded it to an AGEO, which is something I talked about before. Just I want to enable him to play the best game that he can while we're still pushing in bot. So he is gonna just park hounds up, and hounds are plasma units. They're high ground, so they can just chip away and do tons of damage. And at the same time, my Sheldons are just gonna be at range, right? These 5 Sheldons have 28 kills. They've done tons of damage. And I should probably be repairing these, but I want to try to get the reclaim first. So we're shooting, we're doing everything we can. My ally here is making a really good move, and he's actually gonna pork bottom. And offensive pork like this is something that's generally underutilized, but it's a really, really good thing to do. And if I was smarter, I probably could have included more twitchers and brought them in. But I want to help support him while he gets that up. Neza comes with an insane number of Shuris, 57, which, as you know, is a lot. But I have all my trashers here now, and so it won't be as big of a deal. Some of my units will get stunned, but now we have a lot more AA to actually sort of deal with it, so I won't lose as many. Going back to my base, I still have all of these labs, and these 3 labs are on the same thing, right? I want resbots, I want grunts, and I want trashers. There are some situations where like you might not need as much AA, or you might want, you know, more resbots or whatever. So you can adjust this as necessary, but I think in terms of like a starter queue for a grunt spam, I think that's a good thing to do, just so that you do have the anti-air for things like Shuris, and you have the resbots that even if they need to, they can kind of suicide in a bit and they can eat as much as possible. Back to my original decision, I don't really want to go mammoth here after thinking about it, because Bing's only been making hounds. And while hounds are 300 metal, he's in an eco position, right? And I don't actually know if I saw this before. I don't think I saw it in game. Maybe we did get a scout on it, but my concern is that he's going to be able to like have what I have, which is 1 to 2 APHIS, and he's going to start making razors. And razors fight really well into mammoths. You can definitely beat them, you know, like by kiting them at range and then by spy botting them and everything else. But it's sort of an uphill battle to fight into them with mammoths. Demons, on the other hand, are god tier units, and they're completely fine to fight into razors. They do very, very well. They kind of just crush razors. So that's what prompts my decision to go T3 here. And because I want the metal, I'm going to eat my T2 lab and then I'm going to put all that metal into my T3 so that I can get other things. And here comes the Razorback. So I've got my comm, not a big deal. We've got a jammer, even though it was briefly disabled by damage. He can't really push up here, primarily because, well, one, there's a big army, but also the threat of commanders. So if he comes up, we can degun him. And map is still looking okay, right? This is looking a little suspect, but not horrible. I'm gonna try to push in a bit more, but honestly, I shouldn't have even made this. When you have T1 spam and you have a lot of it, it generally speaking, unsupported, can't fight into like T2 units, especially, and T3 units, especially like Razorbacks. So even though I have all of these, it makes more sense for me to go up here. I kind of wanted to provide vision and have a little bit more meat for like my Sheldons, my Arbiters, and this guy is building stuff, right? Like he has Scorpions, but I sort of misplay here. Like I'm just throwing units away to Razors and I really shouldn't be. So more Shuris, but we've got AA somewhere. And my commander is going to try to stay cloaked just within that so that when the Razors come, if I need to run back, I can just come up and degun. Which I hope I do right here. Yeah. Okay. Right. So he had no chance to actually degun that. He would have needed spam and the spam would have needed to get close to me, but I have grunts to stop it. So my commander is the best defense against T3. And that goes back to the original thing of like, you want to try to keep as many commanders alive as possible. Right? Because we have 7 comms, so we're actually relatively strong versus T3. On Rosetta, when comm counts get lower, it's one of the few maps where you routinely will see like game-ending behemoths, because people will come and a lot of times like they'll drop a T3 lab right here and they have a massive surplus of metal and they'll just start marching behemoths in. And if you have a lot of comms, that's not a big deal because you can just run up and you just, you know, you degun it and you trade your comm and whatever, that's life, right? But when the numbers are low, you can't just try to degun every behemoth. And so the behemoths just run up and they'll just crush everything. So this just kind of harkens back to, this is the reason why you actually try to keep your comm alive as long as possible, especially on this map. So Brown is going to flex down. I don't really have the units and I kind of get chipped away here. But I've got demons coming and I can literally just do demons on repeat with spam on repeat. And my goal here is to end the game, right? An important thing when you're kind of like in these positions is you want to be able to flex anywhere else, but more importantly, you want to kill eco, right? Killing units is sort of irrelevant because they can just res it or eat it and then send more units. The real damage when you're fighting comes from killing bases, right? It comes from killing geos, killing aphis. So that's what I want to start thinking about. And when I think about that, I think, okay, what are the units that I want to make in that situation to raid? I want to make demons because they're fast, they're AoE, and they're great at killing stuff. And I want to have spam with it so that my demons can't get degunned, but also so that if I send a bunch of units up, even if like 90% of them die, you've all had the situation where like one grunt or one tick gets in the back of your base and he shoots a converter and the converter chains and you lose like your entire economy to like 37 metal. Spam, if it isn't like super hard countered like it is here by Razors, but there aren't Razors up here, even if you get in a few units into the back line, you can completely destroy an economy. And so that's my thought here, right? My thought is like, all right, let's make Razors, let's make grunts, we can res or we can eat everything behind it, and then all we need to do is try to get up here and try to kill eco. So he doesn't have a radar, so I can get a little bit closer and I can degun. Small micro thing here, right? I want to try to keep my army here is a little close. I probably could have backed up even more, but I want to treat my commander, like I said before, away from my army, because if he's degunning, if I kill all of these and he lives, that's fine. But if I degun a few and then he dies, but I kill half my army with his death explosion, it's not fine. So I want to try to keep him separated so that he doesn't die. And this is actually not what I do, but this is hilariously OP. So this guy's gonna build a Basilica, and if you look, the attack range for it, because it's here, hits like 4 bases. Well, probably 5 bases, right? So I've actually had never seen the offensive Basilica here where you can't break bottom, but really, really cool idea. All right, let's finish this out. So my comm's low, I'm gonna run him back, but my first demon is here. And I see that there's pork up here, and I see that there are hounds up here. So it's going to be really hard, especially with the unit composition that I have, to try to like dance around or do anything. What I'm going to need to do instead is just full commit. I know that Bing probably has Aphis, right? But an AGO is super explosive, like we talked about before, and it's still a ton of energy. Like if I look at my own economy, right? My AGO is 1250. I only have 7,400 energy. So losing my AGO does impact my economy significantly. Also, if there's additional pork here and I can pop the AGO, it'll kill everything else. So for that, I'm just gonna rush my demon up. And I can just kind of accept that, yeah, he'll probably die, but I wanna break this hill and I wanna pop this AGO. And I have the supporting units kind of with him. I might lose a few treasures here, which is a bit of a mistake, but I pop this and that's gonna kind of help. Now I'm gonna start flexing up north. The reason why I'm gonna flex up north is because, well, one, I'm confident that no air can hold bot. So I don't necessarily need to be here. Like I don't feel like he's gonna die or he's gonna, leak through. And he even has pork here and a commander. My issue is that there's a Razor and it's hard for me to push into like this Razor Hound stuff, but more importantly, Bing's base is here. And Bing's base, if he's teching, like if I look at my own base, I have a ton of build power. So if I feel threatened, like if stuff is coming, I can just grab my T2 con and I can just literally be like, all right, well, there's units coming. Let's drop like 5 scorpions, or like, let's drop a bulwark. And they have so much BP available that they can just instantly, well, not instantly, but they can relatively quickly erect a defensive line, and he can hold with his T3 long enough that I'm going to start trying to push into this, and there's going to be like pulsars and scorpions, and all I'm going to do is feed. So instead of banging my head against the front wall, I'm just going to go, hey, there's eco here, right? Let's go raid and let's go kill that instead. Well, that was a little bright. Important thing to note here. I'm not scaling. There are times when you want to scale, like if you feel like the game is slowing down and you're not winning your lane, you're not pushing, you're not securing reclaim, you're not dealing damage, by all means, you should stop and you should start scaling. However, this entire game, even though it's been slow, we've been pushing. And my opponents have been making units. So I'm not afraid of getting outscaled, at least in my lane. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to scale, and I'm just going to hard commit and use all of my metal to just make units and to try to end the game. This is sort of like a skill that you just develop over time, and it's really playstyle specific, right? Like if you look at someone like Emre, who's whatever 52 OS, he doesn't scale very much. He's just sort of like a frontline hyper aggressive god. But if you look at someone like 8D, he is like, high 40s or mid 40s, but he's a much more kind of passive pork style player where he is going to scale every game and then he's just going to out macro you. And some of that's personal preference, some of that is game specific. That's something that you'll just sort of develop as you play more. But for me, I feel like they don't have a lot of comms. I'm afraid to push into something that has the BP to erect pulsars and already has T3 guarding it. So why don't we just make raiding units, and why don't we just go try to kill economy? So same rules apply here, right? I'm going to kill his build power, and then I'm going to target converters and anything that goes pop, right? So for example, his fusions. And then here, I make the cardinal rule, or I break the cardinal rule of T3, which is you always want to support your tier 3 units. Now, you'll notice that I have radar here, and I have anti-air here, and I have all these things, but they are down here. And my tier 3 is up here. So you can probably guess what's going to happen because I'm against a good air player, right? He's core. I'm going to lose these units to Shermans. That's just a complete miss micro by me, and it's something that I should have thought about beforehand. I even have the counters, but I just don't use them. The other thing too is like, I have res bots. I should really have my commander and my res bots farther up, consuming all of this, right? Because there is an insane amount of reclaim here, right? There's 11k reclaim. So I should have had other stuff there to reclaim, but I sort of miss micro this a little bit. This is just the standard Shuri thing, right? So he's gonna bring 986 metal worth of Shuris, and he's gonna shut down a 6,000 metal demon. No biggie here. I'm gonna queue a self-D, and it won't go off because I get locked, and then I'm pretty sure I just die, or I get degunned, or I just, die and then leave a wreck. The reason why you want a self-D, if you think you're gonna get emped, or if your T3 is gonna die like deeper in the enemy base, is I don't want to leave a wreck. So if you self-D, you don't leave a wreck. So in a perfect world, before he gets emped, I would actually have him self-D, and then I already killed the base with him here. Then he doesn't leave behind a wreck, right? They can't res it, they can't capture it, they can't do anything. That's not what happens, as you see here. And then again, even though demons have built-in AA, it doesn't matter because like 10 Shuris can just completely negate a unit 20 times their cost. But hey, not a big deal, not a big deal. We're just gonna kind of keep pushing and doing everything we can. I'm gonna bring my res bots up here to eat. And they only have one commander, right? And I just saw the last commander. So suddenly our win condition changes from like, oh, we need to kill all these people and we need to break their economy and then we need to protect all these other things, to just like send units here and kill the commander and then we win. And that's all we have to do, right? I don't know why my air player is emping this T3 lab, and I actually don't even think I see this. But Bing actually didn't scale that well, and he didn't actually have that much BP, so I probably could have pushed in and killed him. But in the moment, I just felt like, hey, there's T3, hey, he can just pork really easily. So that's why I flexed up, and I was able to kill the whole brown player. But now the game literally just becomes, hey, can we spam and push up, and can we find the last commander and win? So we're all going to try to collapse up here, and the beauty, the light teal player is also just going to start spamming demons. And so here, well, they're going to resign. But one other thing that I kind of want to, I want to not drill in, but just kind of reiterate is, when it comes to deciding whether or not you're going to like scale or push or do whatever, you want to make sure that that decision like is in step with what's happening in the game, right? Like if it's super porked and you can't break it and you can't flex anywhere, by all means you want to scale. But in a situation like this where like you can end the game, it generally makes a lot more sense to just keep spamming units. Here I kind of get greedy because I saw all that reclaim and I had res bots going there, so I actually drop an Aphis so that I can like utilize all that metal, and then all my res bots die. But at the end of the day, they resign because the last comm was here and we're gonna be able to run it down with demons, right? He can probably degun a few, but we still just end up killing. So that is kind of one of the backline tech spawns of Rosetta. And in terms of scaling, right, like, well, I actually scaled relatively well that game. I don't feel like I should have. And we did decent in terms of like pushing and doing everything down here. But the core tenets of the position, right, are you are one of two techers and you guys are a team, right? You need to figure out who's doing what. So I want to try to help my speed bump spot not get absolutely trucked early. So if I need to make grunts, if my commander needs to be there, whatever, I want to try to help him. And I also want to coordinate with I Will Conquer. Because he went T2 and rushed a Czar, I need to realize that, okay, I'm the person who has to give everyone else on my team, or the majority of my team, tier 2, because otherwise we're going to get outskilled later if his push top fails. Then once I've given out T2, right, I can start saying, all right, what are the weak points, or what can we break? In this situation, I saw Calder's army down here, so I can say, let me just drop the standard like Sheldon, Jammer, Arbiter, and we can slow push this. Because we were able to keep pushing, I can make the decision to just keep making units. If that push stalls, then we stop making units. But it didn't, so we kept making units. And then once we run into something we can't break with our raiding unit composition, we're going to flex up into other places that we can raid and that we can do eco damage to, right? Because trading unit corpses is meaningless. Killing eco is how you win games, right? Killing eco and killing commanders. So that is it, more or less. And if you guys have any questions, yeah, let me know. Respond in the comments.